Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dairy Raid. And even though we are still in the middle or just beginning of the 2025 postseason, the college football offseason is already ramping up with new players entering the portal every day, coaches getting fired, coaches getting hired, and right in the middle of that is the Badgers. And with the rosters and staffs ever changing, and it's probably going to keep changing. In fact, probably by the time I actually post this, some of the information that I'm going to give you is going to be irrelevant. But I figure we still need to get out ahead of this and keep reviewing where we left off at the end of the 2025 season and previewing the off season going into 2026, which seems like a recurring theme is going to be the most important off season in at least recent memory, the put up or shut up off season. So yesterday I went through the roster and kind of gave you my 2 cents on the state of the roster, where I think some of the holes are, and some possible directions that I think the coaching staff could go looking for in the transfer portal. Today I want to turn my attention to the staff itself. I'm going to go through the coaches that are currently on the staff, and I'm going to say currently because again, there are likely to be changes this offseason still. And kind of talk about the work that they have done, the work that is still left on the table, and are they going to be able to get the job done? And for me, it is a bit of an awkward situation because as a coach, and I'm not in no sense of the word trying to compare the level that I coach at to Big Ten college football. But I'm not in the business of calling for players or for coaches to lose their jobs. However, I will call it like I see it and let you know if I think there's coaches on this staff who have a lot of work to do to show that their contributions is helping the Badgers moving forward. So I've kind of broken down the staff into 3 categories. I've got the safe category. These coaches have shown me that their contribution is leading to anything from improvement to stabilization to however you want to see it. They're safe and important to the staff going forward. Now, there could be some coaches who I think have some work left to do to show me that they are contributing, that their players are living up to the standard that we expect at Wisconsin. And then I'll be brutally honest with those who I either can't see what contributions they're making, I can't see where they are part of the vision going forward, and that, as much as I don't want to call for coaches to lose their job, positions on the coaching staff that could use an upgrade. We'll leave it there. So, before we get into the current staff as it stands here again, Friday morning, December 12th, 2025, I do want us to take a second to talk about A.J. Blazek and the firing of A.J. Blazek. Been reading a lot the last couple days, particularly amongst the, how should I say it, the Wisconsin people who think 2-star players from Peshtigo are better players than 5-star players from South Lake Carroll or St. Thomas Aquinas or Mater Dei, who think Wisconsin high school football is the greatest thing since sliced bread. They are as predictable as you could get, and calling the failings of A.J. Blazek a direct result of the failings of Luke Fickell. And the fact that A.J. Blazek had endeared himself to the high school coaches in the state of Wisconsin, and he is sorely going to be missed in that, and that it is a mistake, and that he's a scapegoat of the lack of success the team has had the last 2 years. Couple things. A lot of the things that these coaches have been complaining about, recruiting in the state and keeping the best players in the state, A.J. Blazek didn't help in that regard. As the coach who's directly responsible for recruiting some of these players, he certainly didn't keep them in the state, even though you say that he has the right relationship with the coaches. As I have stated many times, the problems with the in-state players have gone beyond the current staff. Wisconsin was losing top-level players to Michigan and Ohio State long before Coach Fickell. Also, A.J. Blazek, as the offensive line coach, understood that you want to get the most talented players available. And so he would rather get 4-star players from Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and Arizona, who would be the top players in the state of Wisconsin, over the top players in the state of Wisconsin, who would be average at best in Pennsylvania, who would not be in the top 10 in Massachusetts or in Arizona. So that argument there, I think, is debunked, as it always has been. It's just personal what these coaches have against the current staff. As for Coach Blazek being the scapegoat of the downfall of the offense over the last couple of years, or certainly this year, I think he did a good job of stopping the bleeding in 2024 and helping to improve the offense. And he did the best he could this year with injuries, with depth issues, all that kind of stuff. Totally get it. But as people have also pointed out, he was the offensive line coach that insisted that Davis Heinzen was a starting left tackle in the Big Ten. He was the offensive line coach who could not coach up a second center and could not get the offensive line rotation settled until it was too late. And yes, he had to work with a lot of young players. But if the young players are more talented than the older players around him, then you've got to get them ready. So, I think A.J. Blazek is a fantastic teacher. I've enjoyed reading and listening and watching him coach. I think he's a great recruiter. But to say that he was not part of the problem in 2025 is looking at his work with rose-colored glasses. He certainly didn't do anything to help. And when the opportunity has come up for Coach Grimes to get a coach who speaks the same language as him, who sees offensive line play the same way that he does, and knows the type of players that will get it done in his offense, it's an opportunity that you have to take. And period. I'm sure if there was a way that they could keep both on the staff, both Eric Mateos and AJ Blazik, they would. But we know that's not possible. And while it was a tough decision, I don't think it's a bad one. I'm not going to say it's the right decision, but it's not a bad decision to move on from AJ Blazik and to bring in a coach that Jeff Grimes can work with better. Period. I hope AJ Blazik lands on his feet. I know he will. I know he's going to find another job, and I know he's going to continue to coach, and I look forward to seeing more of his work. But the decision's been made, and the offensive line room is moving on. All right, so there we go. That was 10 minutes on AJ Blazik. Let's move on to the rest of the staff and talk about where they stand, what kind of work they've done, what kind of work that they have left to do, and where we are going to be going forward here in 2026. All right, so first thing, I'm going to focus mainly here on the full-time position coaches. And I'm not going to go into depth with the assistant position coaches because I am not 100% sure how much actual influence most of these coaches have had on their respective positions this season, and therefore it would be inappropriate of me to try to give them grades. All right, so going forward, if I learn more about what their actual role is and how much actual contribution they have to the team, we'll talk about it, but for now, we won't. All right, so starting off with the safe category. Number 1, Mike Tressel. And I can feel the buttholes piercing of the sweater vests as I say his name and say his name in a positive way. But whether you like it or not, the defense took a step forward in 2025. They addressed issues in terms of roster makeup and moved the defense makeup, you know what I'm trying to say. And they moved the defense in the direction that we are seeing the defense that they originally wanted to bring to Wisconsin. Okay. They fixed the pass rush issues with the roster upgrades and changes to schemes. They did a lot to fix the run defense. Okay. And therefore, I think he did a really good job in moving this defense forward. I think a big part of that, what that helped him focus on improving the defense, was handing over the day-to-day operations of the inside linebacker room so he can focus more on the picture. He can focus more on game planning. And I think the evidence of that is pretty obvious. And I am encouraged to see what direction we're going to continue to go in 2026. Speaking of the inside linebackers, and I know I wasn't going to say I didn't want to talk much about the assistant position coaches, but one that I will speak of is Tuf Borland. He is your de facto inside linebacker coach. He is listed as an assistant linebacker coach, but he handled the day-to-day position coaching of the inside linebackers. He's also been quite a steady force in recruiting. Again, that's another part that Mike Tressel stepped back from. And a lot of credit for the quick rise of Mesa Posa, Cooper Catalano has been the work of Tuf Borland. I would hope that going into 2026, they promote him to the full-time inside linebacker coach, and they give him the pay raise and the pay bump that he deserves for that. Because natural playmaking ability can take a player so far, but when you see how comfortable the young players are in the system, that is a credit to coaching. And that is a credit to the work that Tuf Borland has done, and I hope will continue to do. There are going to be teams that are going to be looking out for him. Look at any new coaching staff who has connections to Ohio State are going to be sniffing for him. And as has been said, with all of this new investment into the football program, he's someone that you want to invest in and keep in the fold. So that's Tuf Borland. Another coach I think did a pretty solid job and is safe for 2026 is E.J. Whitlow. I think it's overlooked, excuse me, with the emergence of the young inside linebackers, the work that Mason Reiger, Sebastian Cheeks, Daryl Peterson, the edge rushers did, the outside linebackers did, to overlook how improved the defensive tackles were this season. And with a ever-evolving cast, with a cast of players who fit different roles, and how Coach Whitlow was able to utilize all these different skill sets. So, and a lot can be said that, maybe this improvement was done, of course, by additions in the transfer portal. But if you look at a guy like Brandon Lane and his emergence from, a transfer portal entry last year who didn't really contribute to being a really solid contributor this year, and positioning himself that when it's time for him to go to the NFL, that he can make some money, turning into a solid all-around interior defensive lineman. That's a credit to coaching. And E.J. Whitlow has taken what he's been given and he has elevated his room. And I think he did a very good job in helping with the setting of a rotation and getting the specific personnel / down and distance situations grouping down pat. So I think he did a solid job. And it's kind of saying with Tuf Borland, I look forward to seeing how that room continues to evolve this year, as it is going to be ever changing. A lot of the key contributors from last year are going to be gone. In their place are going to be young players, transfer portal, etc. And let's hope that the room doesn't skip a beat going into next year. All right, next up in the quote-unquote safe category, and it's hard for me to say this one because as much as I think he has done a good job in coaching his position, I know for a fact that he rubs players the wrong way. And he may be a little bit too old school for the position that he coaches. And that is Paul Haynes. We've had so many players leave his room over the last couple of years, and they have either subtly or unsubtly put the blame squarely on Paul Haynes. And, part of me contributes it to, kids with daddy issues who have problems with authority. But then there are old school hard asses who don't understand younger players. That being said, outside of Ricardo Holman's regression over the last 2 years, and I do think part of Rico's regression has been himself and his own mental blocks. I think Paul Haynes has built a solid room. If you look at everybody who's been contributing on the other side, from Nizer Forkreen in previous seasons to Emilio Agard and Deani Hill this season, the cornerback room is a solid group. The problem is his coaching style has led the room to be very, very young. And so, how do I put this? I think Paul Haynes is in the safe category if you just look at his output on the field. But I would not be surprised if they moved on from him based on who he is. So there we go. And I know I'm going to be eating my words here. I'm going to put this out, and we're going to see that he has moved on. But we'll see. Hey, if it's just his play, if it's just his coaching on the field, I think he's done a good job. And we'll go from there. All right. So last up in the safe category has nothing to do with results on the field. If it was 100% had to do with results on the field, he would have been fired probably middle of the season. It's Jeff Grimes. I want to maybe put him in the has some work to do category, which he does, but he's not going anywhere. They are going to give him the benefit of the doubt of him having to try to come to terms with injuries, depth issues, player mismatches, going through 4 quarterbacks. All that can contribute to an offense having a poor season and can undermine any work that a coach could do. Okay, that being said, while I'm going to put him in the safe category, here's some things that is going to put him in the middle between the has work to do category and the safe category. Okay, he's got his offensive line coach. Great. His thoughts and ideas on the run game and run blocking have nothing to do with the success of this team. He needs to focus on his understanding of the passing game, his understanding of the use of quarterbacks, and he very much this year seemed like a all or nothing type of play caller, where he didn't think of the health of the QBs to paring the offense down so much that the QB was rendered ineffective, or a passing game that was focused on fancy motions and shifts into screens, overcomplicating to chuck it and duck it. It's 3rd and 10. Let's try to throw the ball 60 yards downfield with nothing in between. That has to change. Now, we're going to talk later about how I think that can change with other coaches on the staff, but that's the work that needs to be done with him. So I say he's safe. He ain't going anywhere, obviously. If he was going somewhere, it would have happened by now. But he has work to do to show that he's the type of play caller that can help us go forward. All right. Getting into the has work to do category. And originally I had AJ Blazik in this category in my notes. We already talked about him. So that only leaves one coach. And he's only been with us for 1 season. And so it is probably a bit disingenuous of me to put him in the work to do category. But he's a coach on the staff who is going to have the most pressure going into this season because his room has not performed to the standards of modern college football before him, with him, and it has to go forward. And that is Jordan Reed with the receiver room. I think he is a solid recruiter. His decommitments at the end of the 2025 cycle notwithstanding, of course, he did pick up a flip there towards the end. Okay. But when I see Tretch and Vinny Anthony making the same mistakes that they made last year, that they made the year before in the case of Vinny Anthony, to see Jalen Ballard just not know how to get open with all the speed that he has. And then there's no depth in the room outside of a true freshman. And so all the focus is on the players I just mentioned and Eugene Hilton, and none of them improved. As you've watched with my breakdown videos, I've put a lot of blame on the play calling for putting the offense in situations where what are they going to expect? You're making it really hard for players to get open. But that being said, they have to get open because the response to my why are we running these plays to the short side of the field? It's hard for the receivers to get open. Jeff Grimes is probably saying to himself, my receivers at Baylor could get open doing that. My receivers at Kansas could get open doing that. My receivers at BYU could get open doing that. Why can't ours? And I'm going to put that on the wide receiver room and the wide receiver coach. Jordan Reed is maybe being a little bit of a scapegoat in this, probably. And when we needed to get a receiver coach last year, before the investment in the coaching or in the program, maybe he was the best option we could get with the money that we were allowed to spend. But that being said, the receiver room has to move forward this year. And it either means that, we are going to have transfer portal guys coming in, but young guys have got to show that they are able to contribute early. Coach Reed has to coach them up to get them on the field. And, if he can't do that, then we need to move on. Because back in the day, we could get by with subpar wide receiver play at Wisconsin because we had subpar QB play. We cannot live in that world anymore, and we know it. So that's why I'm putting Jordan Reed in the work to do category. All right, we are going to move on to the next category. Okay, and I have titled this section in my notes the time to move on / I won't be sad if they left category. Again, I don't like, as a coach, hearing about other coaches getting fired. I don't want to call for coaches to get fired. However, when I look at these three coaches' contribution to the on-the-field product, and they have had multiple years to show me what they can do, and there's still no sense of improvement. If we're going to invest in the program, then these are three positions that I think we could upgrade because we need to upgrade them. First thing, Devin Spalding. Another coach who is well regarded by the high school coaches in the state of Wisconsin. I think he's a solid recruiter. Obviously, he helped bring in the three-headed monster recruiting class last year, or 2024. So that is commendable. However, Darian Dupree is making the same mistakes he made last year. He is not a complete back. Cade Yakimelli is a one-trick pony who never learned how to be a complete running back. I don't care how much of a freak he is. He's not a running back. Rookie mistakes are continuing to be being made. Rotations, I don't think, are set right. Personnel groupings, depth chart, whatever. All these things that a running back coach who has an influence over the offense is supposed to do hasn't been being done. And besides bringing players in, what has he done? Like if he can bring players into the program but can't coach them up, then maybe it's time to move Devin Spalding into the recruiting department. The University of Wisconsin has been and always shall be a running back focused university. And there have been times where we have had really good running back coaches who have elevated the room. We have had times where we've had all-world, all-American running backs who elevated over a coach. In this situation, we have neither. So we need to have the coach. And right now, we don't have it. Next up, on the kind of the same tone, Nate Letton. Again, what has he done other than bringing in some kids? You know, our tight ends have been solid blockers. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the best receiving tight end that we've had in the 3 years that Nate Letton has been the tight end coach has been a transfer who came in this season, who was developed by somebody else. But again, we look at Tucker Ashcraft. Has he improved? I think he's a solid player. I think he was put into playing time way too early. I think he stepped up, but he never stepped forward. And the young guys that are brought in to be the future of the position, where have they been? The holdovers who needed to be coached up to play tight end, where did they go? And it just leads to if Nate Letton was taken off the coaching staff right now, would we feel a difference? I don't think we would. Again, he's a solid recruiter. He works well with the kids. He's good at building the relationships. Again, maybe he would be better suited being in the recruiting department. But we need a tight end coach who can really work and build up the players to the level that our former tight end coach, offensive coordinator, is expecting and needs. And I don't think we have that right now. So, again, I don't want to ever put myself in a position calling for another coach's job. But if Nate Letton was let go tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised. It's time for an upgrade at the tight end position. Which leads me to the final coach that I would like to talk about. And his shortcomings have, I think, hamstrung us at two positions. And that is Kenny Guyton. Again, do I think he was an upgrade last season over Mike Brown? Maybe. I don't think Mike Brown did a particularly good job in 2023. But to say that his room improved, and took the next step last season in 2024 would not be accurate. Was the foundation laid for continued growth into 2025 when he moved on into the quarterback room? I don't think so. And was he prepared, as even though he was a former college quarterback who has spent a lot of time working with offensive coordinators and knows the position, was he ready to be a big time QB coach? And again, he was put in a difficult position because the administration was cheap last year. Okay, I know for a fact that they wanted other QB coaches, and the administration would not pony up the dough to get them. And they were outbid by lower level programs. Just leave it at that. Okay. If you don't know who I'm talking about, Google is your friend, and you'll be able to figure out the connection that I'm talking about. That being said, on top of being partially to blame for the lack of development of the wide receivers, the fact that they benched his star pupil and basically the Coach Fickell and Coach Grimes are giving up on his star pupil, I think shows a lot about what Coach Fickell thinks of his coaching abilities. He had absolutely no noticeable contribution to the worst passing offense in Wisconsin history. And if Carter Smith was seen to be not ready for primetime football, that's one thing. But to then not push and advocate and help design a game plan that could build on what he already knows and what could be added to help him go to the next level shows a fundamental flaw and a fundamental part of Kenny Guyton's coaching repertoire that's missing. And when you have a QB coach such as that, who I think is focusing more on learning how to be a quarterback coach, and everybody has to be in that position. Again, I'm not blaming that. But when you have an offensive line minded offensive coordinator, you need a quarterback coach who can advocate and can push for the correct usage of the passing game with a offensive line coach who doesn't see the game the same way that he does. You need that balance. The same way you need a run game coordinator to keep a pass-oriented offensive coordinator level-headed. And Kenny Guyton was not that this year. And it needs to be. Jeff Grimes needs a counterpoint. Or the offense is going to continue to be what it is this year, or it was this year. A unbalanced, incoherent run game with a passing game that is flash and awe and no substance. And doesn't matter who we have to have everything in the middle. QB coach needs to help bring that. Coach Guyton did not do that this year. And if Brian Hartline reaches out, tries to bring in his old Ohio State buddy to have him come to South Florida, am I going to be shedding a tear? No, because I think the quarterback room needs an upgrade. And either Kenny Guyton needs to find his soul as a QB coach fast and show that he's learned a lot, or they need to look elsewhere. All right, so that is a brief rundown of where I think the coaching staff sits at this point. I still think there are going to be changes to the staff. As some of these other programs start to finalize their head coaching hires and the position coaches and coordinators start moving around, you're going to see people move around. People are going to become available. The administration is going to know what kind of money that they're going to be allocating. I think there's going to be changes, and I hope they're upgrades. And not just coaches who can placate the coordinators, but coaches who can develop talent and attract talent to Madison. It seems like throughout the years we have been able to have guys who did one or the other. They could develop or they could attract talent. But in modern college football, you need both. And we've got to take that step forward in 2026, or it's not going to matter because we're going to be starting all over again in 2027 with these same problems. And then we have to replace everything. So that's it. That's a look at the coaching staff. Thank you, as always, for listening to this. As we get deeper into the offseason, there's going to be more content along these lines, looking at roster development, the staff, the development of the system, etc. going forward. We're still going to work on completing the breakdowns, but a lot of work left here to do with the dairy rate, a lot of things to look forward to. So thank you, as always, for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.